Dang. Chapter 31. With a patch of large bruise on his brow ridge, Xiaoyulo sat in his office, and sitting across from him was Tu Yao, who was casually sipping tea. What is this? Xiaoyulo held a list in his hand, which was loosely marked here and there with a few faint indents left by fingernails. The men Du Gong picked. Tu Yao put down his teacup. They'll enter the Ministry of War at the end of the year. Do take care of them. Xiaoyulo stared at those faint marks, frowning as he did so. Tu Yao smiled and asked, "What? You've never seen these before?" He leaned forward and whispered to Xiaoyulo, "Du Gong doesn't know how to write. Just do him a favor." Some of those indents were deep, some shallow, a thing that seemed to only fit an unbetrothed young girl. Xiaoyulo's aversion towards them was more than evident on his face. Then how does he read the name list? He knows a few characters, he just doesn't know how to write half intentionally and half casually, Tu Yao said as he fixed his gaze on Xiaoyulo's eyes. Do you take him for Liao Jixiang? The sudden mention of that name made Xiaoyulo's heart skip a beat, as he put up a clumsy performance to appear ignorant. Our Du Gong came from the East Yamen. It appeared that Tu Yao had extracted something from Xiaoyulo's eyes, so he smoothly changed the subject. The East Yamen. Xiaoyulo leaned closer. Zonggusi. It was where the eunuchs practice operas and plays, a place known as the least prestigious of the 24 yamens of eunuchs. Once one entered that office, one could never have a share of power or respect. Then how did he? Note, Zonggusi, the bell and drum department had a eunuch in charge of the seal. The primary responsibility of the bell and drum department was to ring the bells and drums when the emperor went out to court. In addition, the bell and drum department was also responsible for music and dance, drama, and juggling in the palace. Whenever the emperor returned to the palace after visiting the temples, or when he returned to the palace on the birthday, winter solstice, and New Year's Day, music was played in front of the emperor to welcome him to the palace to take his seat. How did he become a eunuch, and how did he end up as the Grand Supervising Eunuch of Nanjing? Tu Yao laughed heartily as he patted his thigh, because His Majesty likes him. It's that simple. He said it as if it were a matter of course. While Xiaoyulo was taken aback, he asked again as if with hidden intent, "Didn't anyone tell you?" Xiaoyulo innocently shook his head. "Are you implying that His Majesty, and him?" At this point, he stopped, recalling that a similar thing seemed to have been suggested by Liao Jixiang at the peak of his anger. Now that he thought about it, Liao Jixiang had never uttered any unpleasant word about Zheng Xian in his presence, a testament to his honorable, gentlemanly demeanor. In the palace, few of those with a pretty face could remain untouched. Tu Yao made it sound undeniably true. Hearing that, Xiaoyulo tried to pretend to be indifferent by laughing it off, yet he couldn't manage to bring a smile to his face. "That's just an exaggeration, no. You should know that the Dang all address Du Gong as Miss Zheng. Have you ever wondered why?" Tu Yao stood up, dusted his robe and chanted, "Who looks the best in tight-sleeved military attire? There comes Miss Zheng, following the imperial procession." Although Tu Yao was gone, his words remained, echoing around Xiaoyulo's ears, making him restless all day long. Once he finally managed through the office hour, he hurried to Xianzhen Lane. Yet, the moment he arrived at Meifu Street, a hand grabbed him by his neck from behind and dragged him to a secluded spot. Before he could react, a leg kicked him in the lower back. Grimacing, he wanted to shout for help, but he was immediately muffled by another hand over his mouth. Then, a big man sat astride him, his movements sudden and heavy. It was Yishiha. "You bastard!" Yishiha slapped him in the face. Xiaoyulo struggled, strenuously rolling his eyes to look back, and saw that the one covering his mouth was the mute, Aliu. "Surely you know why we came." Naturally, Xiaoyulo knew, which was exactly why he was afraid. He looked up at them, eyes tainted with fear. "Who gave you the gut to remove the star from the sky?" Aiming for his stomach, Yoshiha's fist struck all of a sudden. The neatly arranged organs in Xiaoyulo's body seemed to be punched loose. The first thing he felt after the hit was pain, and as the pain subsided, he felt his innards recoiled and churned sharply. If you dare to visit our dugong again, Yoshiha pointed at his nose with his thick fingers. I'll show you how we, the Jurchen, butcher livestock. He stood up and gestured to Aliu, who loosened his grip. But just as Aliu relaxed, Xiaoyulo retorted as if he had no regard for his life, I was just about to visit him, so why don't you butcher me now? Yoshiha was stunned, exchanging glances with Aliu in astonishment. Have you no shame? He sounded both frustrated and helpless. Do you have any idea of the filthy things you did? About that matter, Xiaoyulo acknowledged that he was in the wrong. With his eyes darting and evading, he muttered, you wouldn't understand even if I explained. There were some things in this world, which once uttered, would bring shock to everyone, but if these words remained unvoiced, Xiaoyulo would feel that he didn't do justice to the sincere heart and feelings he had for Liao Jixiang. He and I, we have feelings for each other. Yoshiha and Aliu stared at him with their mouths agape, apparently unable to comprehend his words. It's like a man falling in love with a woman. Xiaoyulo tried to make an analogy. I've fallen in love with him. Who are you taking as a woman? Yoshiha slapped him on the face again. Yet this time, the slap didn't intimidate Xiaoyulo. If anything, it actually brought out his courage. I don't care whether he's a man or a woman. I just want this person for who he is. While he was at it, he decided to let go of all his concerns. I'm beyond salvation anyways. What happens to me is up to you now. Bang. The back door to a nearby household was suddenly forced open from the inside. An elderly rushed out, his Wangjin was tilted, blood stained his face and pants. He ran towards them as he yelled, murderer. Yoshiha and Aliu instinctively drew their long swords and simultaneously positioned themselves in front of Xiaoyulo while helping him to his feet. Chasing after the elderly was a dark-skinned man wielding a hacking knife. Judging by his appearance, he should be the one of those forced laborer. What's going on? Yoshiha yelled. Upon seeing him, the laborer gradually halted, turned around and ran in the opposite direction. The elderly man was panting faster and heavier, and he finally collapsed by the wall after using up all his strength. He carelessly wiped away the blood-stained sweat from his face, pounded his chest and stomped his feet. The servants got together to rebel. Order in Nanjing City is gone. Xiaoyulo wanted to shove Aliu aside and approach the man, but Yoshiha grabbed him immediately. Go home now. Lock the door and don't go anywhere else. Xiaoyulo understood the implications, but just as he was about to leave, he turned and tugged Yoshiha's arm. You, help me tell him. There were a ton of words on his mind, and he didn't know which ones to pick. Eventually, he softly said, tell him, that I miss him. These words were so bold that even the messenger would blush upon hearing them. The way Yoshiha looked at him contained both shyness and blame, yet in the end, he still patted Xiaoyulo's shoulder as a gesture of agreement. As they watched Xiaoyulo walk away, Aliu suddenly exclaimed and anxiously gestured to Yoshiha, would that guy inform dugong on us? Without even thinking, Yoshiha blurted out, he's not that kind of man. He was then taken aback by his own action, as he didn't realize that he found Xiaoyulo so trustworthy deep down. The two of them continued to saunter their way back. The city of Nanjing was still bustling and thriving when they reached the main road. Nothing implied the hidden turbulence that was about to bring chaos. As they walked past the Lantern Temple, they heard two old beggars sitting by the wall, chatting. Did you hear about this? The folks fixing the embankment are rebelling. Yoshiha paused and listened intently. Soldiers, and thousands of escaped laborers too, I heard. They went to the brothels first, going after both the old and young. Hearing this, Aliu immediately turned and dashed away. Yoshiha chased after him for several steps. Where are you going? the boy ignored him and disappeared into the crowd in a flash. Now everyone is going mad. Yashiha turned around muttering. As he made a step, he was suddenly enlightened, that the boy was rushing to find Guo Xiaozhou. Brothels, rich households, shops, these were the places that the mob would definitely visit first. And male prostitutes, like their female counterparts, were always the first ones to suffer in a havoc. It was just as expected, the yard was already drowned in blood when Alio finally arrived at Guo Xiaozhou's place. How could the prostitutes resist? Yet regardless of their obedience, those who sold off their body for a living could end up having their hands and feet cut off mercilessly. There was never a moment in his life when Alio hated his voiceless throat so much as he did right now. With his bloodshot eyes, he searched door to door. By the time he reached the warehouse in a small building, his ears suddenly picked up some noise from the kitchen next to him. With one kick, he entered the door and saw two mobs, their butts exposed, trying to drag people down from the top of a big cabinet. The person hiding on top of it, coincidentally, was Guo Xiaozhou, along with a boy wearing jasmine flowers. Guo Xiaozhou had a pair of scissors in his hand, cursing as he aimlessly stabbed downwards. The words he used were extremely fierce and vicious. Growing up, Alio had never heard of such nasty words before. He drew his long sword, approached from the back of mobs and decisively slashed twice. Blood was spilling out. The person hiding on top of the cabinet fell silent, staring straight at him. Alio extended his arms towards Guo Xiaozhou, his smile wide and artless, showing his neat white teeth. Even though he was a eunuch, even though he was a humble man from Annan, he was majestic and imposing at that moment, glittering proudly like gold. The first one to jump down, however, was not Guo Xiaozhou but the boy wearing jasmine flowers. He landed softly into Alio's arms, sweetly calling him Gurgr. All Alio felt was how delicate he was, so he dared not to touch him for fear of hurting him. Just as he was hesitating, a tiny hairpin came smashing in his face, with Guo Xiaozhou yelling at him fiercely, "You stinky mute." Alio couldn't understand why he was being mean, so he only replied to him with an enchanted smile. After being with countless men in his life, Guo Xiaozhou was fully aware that Alio was a silly lad, but this awareness couldn't ease any unhappiness he felt seeing him holding someone else in his arms. A sudden cry was heard outside, which sounded like another wave of mob coming. Alio put the boy down, shook the blood on the long knife as he went out. Before leaving, he didn't forget to securely shut the kitchen door. Guo Xiaozhou listened intently. First, there was a roar, and then a scream. Presently, the boy wearing flowers wanted to climb up the cabinet again after some consideration. So, Guo Xiaozhou picked up his small scissors and pointed at him with the sharp end, addressing him fiercely, "You blind little bitch. Better check again on whose plate the meat is placed." He refused to let him go up, so the boy implored again and again, and while they were busy with their confrontation, the door was pushed open from the outside. Alio was back, bringing with him a foul smell of blood. The first thing he did when he entered the door was to remove his blood-soaked outer robe, roll it up and toss it in the corner. Wearing clean white garments, he stood in front of Guo Xiaozhou with his head drooping. He was afraid that Guo Xiaozhou would shun him due to the blood on his hands, which he may find despicable. However, Guo Xiaozhou couldn't care less as he spoke, "Why are you still standing there like a fool? Your grandpa is starving to death." After obtaining his permission, Alio immediately dragged a large table next to the wall towards the cabinet without even raising his head. He swiftly jumped on it, and carried Guo Xiaozhou off the top of the cabinet like he was carrying a cat. Without even letting his feet touch the ground, he directly put Guo Xiaozhou on his shoulders. "Gig." The boy wearing jasmine flowers pitifully called him. Alio thought he was Guo Xiaozhou's brother, so he wanted to take care of him too, but Guo Xiaozhou scolded him, "You only have 2 arms, are you hugging him or me?" You of course." Alio replied in his heart. Not daring to delay a second more, he carried Guo Xiaozhou out. Guo Xiaozhou, who was once so accustomed to sitting in comfortable sedan chairs and being adorned in precious gold and jade jewels, was now being carried on the shoulder of a poor, dark-skinned boy like a trophy. Together, they walked through the busy and quiet streets of Jinling. Playing with his long hair between his fingers, enjoying the early summer breeze imbued with the fragrance of flowers, Guo Xiaozhou unknowingly let out an unguarded smile, the kind of smile that a toy boy should never have on his face. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Just as how the dough gradually expands in fermentation, the situation slowly went out of control. By the third day of the mob's upheaval, the streets and alleys of Nanjing were filled with an atmosphere of tension and alarm. Xia Yule was getting ready to go to his office early in the morning when De Tian, while collecting the dishes and chopsticks, tried to persuade him otherwise. Are you stupid? Nobody else is going, only you are. Do you think they'll reward you with a high rank? The more dire the situation, the more someone has to take charge. Xia Yulu replied with an air of experience and self-importance. Oh, and you think that should be you? De Tian mocked him. Try managing the grocery expenses at home first. Besides, he was flicking a rag, we've got soldiers guarding all around Nanjing. Why worry about the folks causing trouble? Xia Yulu didn't dare to tell him that even the soldiers were rebelling after years of low salary. Those who were still in their posts were merely assessing which side to take. Once the common folks have knives in their hands, they are no longer common folks. As he spoke, someone was heard knocking on the door. De Tian dropped his task and went to check, and before long, he was shouting anxiously, Master, it's a high-ranked official, high-ranked. And so Xia Yule hurried as he went out to the courtyard, only to find that it wasn't a high-ranked official, rather, it was Mei Azha dressed in a robe with bullfighting rank badge. He had a dozen men with him, each armed with a long sword. When Mei Azha saw Xia Yule, his lips slowly formed a smile. Xia Yule invited him in and served him tea, astonished that Mei Azha also possessed a robe with bullfighting rank badge. How would someone with his status willingly become Liao Jixiang's right-hand man? What was even more odd was that, why would Mei Azha wear the special imperial rewarded robe just to visit him? Mei Azha was in fact intentionally showing it to Xia Yule. Xia Yule had knowledge, which he lacked. Xia Yule had Liao Jixiang's favor, which Mei Azha lacked as well. All Mei Azha possessed to impress Xia Yule was this pitiful bit of power status. Lord Xia, this Mei apologizes for the abrupt visit. Not at all. To be honest, Xia Yule was somewhat afraid of Mei Azha. He had been thoroughly intimidated by Mei Azha's imposing presence at the Meidiao gathering. Lord Mei is paying a visit to this one's humble house. Pray forgive the insufficient hospitality. Such pretentious polite words were something Xia Yule rarely used. Mei Azha looked at him, suddenly saying, I've heard about your feelings for our dugong. Xia Yule was so frightened that he almost slipped from his chair and knelt down on the spot. However, he only lowered his head and dared not make a sound. Is that truly so? Mei Azha asked condescendingly. A man who knows his honor should seek what boons him and avoid the banes. Xia Yule should have immediately denied it, yet that wasn't his style. For things that had long been exposed, he was ashamed of merely beating around the bush. This one made a reckless mistake. It wasn't just a reckless mistake, but a violation of morals. Mei Azha's eyes were almost round, as it had never occurred to him that Xia Yule would have the audacity to admit it. Rage was surging rapidly within him. What do you have to offer? Xia Yule looked at him in surprise. He had expected Mei Azha to blame him, to reprimand him, or even rightfully humiliate his honor, but the words, which very much like "Who do you think you are?" sounded more like a challenge between romantic rivals. This one only has the sincerest heart. Ha! Mei Azha let out a chuckle and waved his hand dismissively. Forget about it. What are you capable of? Show me. Xia Yulu was more than puzzled. Go and ask for soldiers from those higher-ups. May Azah finally turned to face him directly, looking him in the eyes, and resolve the mob. End chapter. Dang. Chapter 32. Nonsense. Zheng Xian slammed his palm hard on the table as he exclaimed, "Why are you asking for a troop right now? Get that idea out of your head right now." Xia Yulu didn't expect such rage from him, so he lowered his head and remained silent. "Is this your own idea?" Zheng Xian asked. It was May Azah's idea. Yet Xia Yulu didn't dare to say it out loud, and only nodded slightly. "How can you tell whether the men you're leading are soldiers or mobs? To risk leading an army there, you might get killed without solving anything." Zheng Xian's reprimand went on and on relentlessly. All of a sudden, he noticed the yellowish bruise on Xia Yulu's eyebrow. "Even if you can bring back peace, at the end of the day, you'll still be known for killing common folks. What good will you get from it?" He had it right, and Xia Yulu knew it. However, he had to stake his life, just so he could stand to be worthy of Liao Jixiang. "What?" Seeing Xia Yulu's dejected look, Zheng Xian thought that he had been too harsh, so he softened his tone and asked attentively, "Have you been bullied?" Xia Yulu understood that he was referring to the bruise on his eyebrow. His hand went for it in a futile effort to hide it. "No, I fell over." "You," Zheng Xian sighed, "have suffered too many wrongs after siding with me." "Who had wronged you? Tell me and I'll stand up for you." "No one," Xia Yulu replied dispassionately, muttering, "I brought it on myself." Which sounded more like a retort in defiance. Zheng Xian cast a glance at him and was about to get angry, but after considering Xia Yulu's troubled personality, he decided against it. Instead, he turned towards Tu Yao and asked, "When will Gong Nian return from his mission of delivering the troops' rations?" "Probably another 10 days or half a month." The corner of Tu Yao's lips tightened upon the mere mentioning of the name, as he recalled that man's absence at Zheng Xian's recent family banquet. "Du Gong, his focus isn't on us at all. He won't be of any help even if he returns." "Well, I think he can be of help." Zheng Xian's glare shifted from Xia Yulu to Tu Yao. "Of all the troops stationed around Nanjing, only his soldiers are dependable." Observing the meanings in Zheng Xian's eyes, Tu Yao couldn't help but feel disturbed. "You'll appoint him?" "I think we should find an excuse to discipline him instead." Zheng Xian smashed his cup. As his long fingers swept over the teacup, the entire cup of tea splashed onto the floor. Tu Yao remained silent, and so did Xia Yulu. After a while of solemn silence, Zheng Xian finally uttered earnestly, "Who else is like Gong Nian, who cares neither for money nor for rank, and is wholeheartedly devoted in defending the country against the Japanese pirates?" Tu Yao couldn't come up with an answer. "He's one of a kind, and you still want to discipline him?" Zheng Xian stood up with his hands over his armchair, supporting his weight. He looked rather fatigued. "Not to mention that he didn't really insult my pride. Even if he actually did, I would choose to tolerate him." The message was pretty clear, so Tu Yao could only grit his teeth and reply affirmatively. Xia Yulu and Tu Yao then made their leave one after the other through a side door, and walked onto the main road. Unable to hold his curiosity back, Xia Yulu asked, "Where did Gong Nian go to escort the troops' rations?" "Zhejiang, for the soldiers fighting against the Japanese pirates." Tu Yao's face was gloomy. He seemed to have something heavy on his mind. As they walked, he suddenly blurted out, "If I had an army, I wouldn't fight worse than him." Xia Yulu didn't continue the subject. From the tone of his voice, he could tell that Tu Yao wasn't jealous of men with talent, nor was he seeking fame or achievements. Instead, he was frustrated about not receiving a platform to practically apply his military prowess, sorrow-filled for having to serve eunuchs subserviently day in and day out. The two of them parted ways on Fudong Street. One headed east, and the other went west. The road down towards the west led the way to the jeweler lane. At the intersection near the Yangshi Bridge, Xiaoyulo spotted Ruan Dian from afar. He was with a small group of men, leading a dozen or so aged horses. Erected right next to them was a rather conspicuous wooden sign, bearing a few large, crooked characters, "Donate horses for fighting against the Japanese pirates." As he approached, Xiaoyulo realized that a temporary checkpoint was set over here. The passers-by who were forced to stop were all officials. Ruan Dian smiled and waved at Xiaoyulo upon seeing him, gesturing for him to directly pass through. Xiaoyulo didn't go through it. Instead he approached Ruan Dian and asked, "What are you doing here?" "The troops defending Zhejiang are short on supplies, so here we are." Ruan Dian pointed towards the line of aged horses, skinny to the bones. "I'm contributing what I can, to help out the emergency." Xiaoyulo couldn't believe that there was such kindness in this man, and just as expected, whenever an official came on their way, Ruan Dian would stop him in the middle of the road and force him to donate a horse. And if the man didn't possess a horse, Ruan Dian would chuckle and say, "We have some here." As he spoke, he would randomly pick one of the horses and exclaim, "That's 100 taels of silver." This was a downright robbery, but all the officials care much more about their reputations than money. Since the accusation of passive attitude towards fighting the Japanese pirates was simply too much, they all ended up handing over the money after some haggling. The horses, however, remained untouched and tied up at the same spot. "How can you do this at a time like this?" Xiaoyulo reproached, trying to keep his voice down. "The situation in Nanjing is like a pot of heated porridge right now, and you never know when it might boil over." Ruan Dian impatiently shook his leg, enduring his nagging. "It's fine, I know what I'm doing." "What do you mean it's fine?" "Take down this sign right now," Xiaoyulo said as he kicked the wooden sign. Ruan Dian immediately furrowed his eyebrows, clearly about to get angry. Yet he eventually didn't unleash his rage after his eyes darted several times around Xiaoyulo. He wasn't afraid of this puny sixth-ranked official standing in front of him, but rather, of Liao Jixiang behind him. "I have a need of the money. Just mind your own business." "How could I not mind your business?" Xiaoyulo's voice rose. "You're intentionally causing trouble. Can you ever shut the fuck up?" Ruan Dian shouted back. Just then, a young eunuch squeezed his way through the crowd. He probably came here running, as he was panting and red-faced. Noticing Xiaoyulo was also around, he cautiously leaned close to Ruan Dian's ear and muttered a few words, which made Ruan Dian's face turn immediately pale. "What happened?" Xiaoyulo asked attentively. Ruan Dian shoved him aside, along with everyone surrounding him, and sprinted northeast at top speed toward Qiandao Bridge. Xiaoyulo was stunned briefly, then he hastened to chase after him. They could hear discontinuous cries even before reaching the entrance of the brothel called Zushi. Xiaoyulo deduced that the mobs must have paid a visit here, to commit heinous crimes, even murder. By the time he finally arrived breathlessly at the three-story building, Ruan Dian and his men were already upstairs. He was just about to catch his breath while leaning against the door, when he heard a series of chaotic clattering from upstairs, which was the sound of people smashing furniture. He lifted the hem of his robe and ascended the stairs. After just a couple of steps, something dripped onto him. Plop! It hit his wangjin and trickled down from his forehead into his eye socket. He reached up to wipe it away. It was dark crimson. It was blood. He was so shocked that he almost collapsed on the spot. After composing himself again and again, he finally continued upstairs. This time, his steps were incredibly slow. When he reached the turn leading to the second floor, he saw the pool of blood that dripped onto him previously. It was a dark, wide puddle. His eyes traced from the puddle upwards, and saw a white arm hanging down from above. Gong gong! Gong gong! Cries could be heard upstairs. They were calling for Ruan Dian. Xiaoyulo held his breath and forced himself to climb upward. Upon reaching the third floor, he could see the body clearly, a girl around 13 or 14 years of age, tainted and tortured, her entire body slashed open from her right armpit. Xiaoyula was completely appalled. He stood still and unable to move an inch. His gaze stiffly went inside the main chamber, where Ruan Dian was standing by the bed with his back to him, surrounded by many men. Xiaoyula could clearly see his knife-wielding hand, now tightly clenched around the knife handle, his knuckles turning white. Gong gong, there were 7 of them. Some folks recognized them, they're easy to find. The eunuchs spoke all at once, their sentences mixed with the chaotic dialect of Annan. And just then, the blanket moved slightly. Xiaoyula shrewdly observed that the person was still alive. Ruan Dian waved his hand in distraught and slowly sat down by the edge of the bed. Xiaoyula saw him reach out, and seemed to be holding onto something. He immediately threw himself forward and, as he expected, Ruan Dian had the woman's neck in his grip. None of Ruan Dian's subordinates made a noise, they were all waiting for him to strangle her. After all, this woman used to be a courtesan, and now she had been tainted by 7 or 8 men. Xiaoyula stole a glance towards the bed. She was naked and wrapped in the blanket, her eyes shut behind those black and swollen eyelids, probably blinded by smoke. "Hey," Xiaoyula called out to Ruan Dian somewhat discourteously, "it's not easy for her to survive until now." Ruan Dian seemed to have heard nothing. His rough, thick, dark fingers caressed and rubbed the delicate white neck of the woman. Only after a long time did he finally loosen his grip slightly. "Gong gong." His men immediately protested. "Are you making yourself a joke by keeping her alive?" Xiaoyula didn't dare to check the woman's expression at that moment. He tried to argue for her, but was interjected by everyone else, "She's blind. She would suffer plenty if she lives." "Yeah, Gong Gong, there are plenty of Yangzhou women to find." Xiaoyula's advice drowned amidst these passionately angry instigations. While he suffered in anxiety, Ruan Dian shouted loudly all of a sudden, "Enough!" He solemnly instructed as he pointed at the door sternly. "Go, hire a carriage." After he spoke, he held the woman wrapped securely in the blanket in his arms. Those eunuchs of his blocked his way, questioning him non-stop, "Never mind about killing her, but where will you take her? What will you do after taking her back?" Ruan Dian, fed up with their complaints, shouted once and for all, "I'll marry her." Once it was announced, not only Ruan Dian's subordinates, even Xiaoyula was utterly stunned. "After suffering such a fate, if I abandon her as well, wouldn't that be the same as leaving her to die?" Upon finishing the sentence, Ruan Dian carried the woman and went downstairs. The staircase was blood-stained, so Ruan Dian slipped. In that brief moment of falling down and getting up, a messenger from the Weaving and Sewing Bureau arrived. Noticing the blood on his arm, the messenger hesitated briefly, then hurriedly said, "Du Gong is furious, asking Gong Gong to report back now." ******. It was a hot day. Liao Jixiang only had his inner garment on, sitting in front of the mirror with his hair pouring over his back. Today, he was using saffron incense, a sweet fragrance circling all around him. He was applying rouge. A small block of red color contained in a seashell box, tapped lightly around the corners of his eyes and on his cheekbones. Once the rouge was evenly spread on the skin, his complexion now was added with a touch of vitality. Ruan Dian looked at him with his waist bending. Liao Jixiang wasn't like this, it was Xiaoyula who had changed him. "Kneel," Liao Jixiang uttered. And Ruan Dian immediately knelt right in the middle of the main chamber. Liao Jixiang stood up, limping towards him. A junior eunuch immediately laid down a large chair in front of Ruan Dian, so that Liao Jixiang could sit at ease. Slap. As soon as he took the seat, Liao Jixiang slapped Ruan Dian across the face. "You're growing bolder every day," he said, staring down at Ruan Dian, "have you forgotten all the caning you received?" Ruan Dian bit down on the soft flesh of his inner cheek, his eyes fierce and defiant. He straightened himself and chuckled. Which matter are you suggesting, Dugong? Slap. Liao Jixiang slapped him once again. His fair hand struck soft on Ruan Dian's face. I brought you all out of Gansu, not for you to disturb the common folks and stir up troubles in Nanjing. Ruan Dian obediently accepted his punishment. Dugong, I have a woman. Once the word Gansu was brought up, he removed his heartless attitude and admitted candidly. I have a family, people I need to take care of. When the word family reached Liao Jixiang's ears, his eyebrows twitched somewhat, which was probably out of admiration, or maybe even jealousy. Isn't she just a courtesan? The said courtesan was now blind, naked, and wrapped in a blanket, barely alive. Ruan Dian's expression grew stern. What's wrong with that? I'm marrying her and I've already bought a house. Don't you dare. Liao Jixiang suddenly slammed the armrest of his chair. All his men were aware that he found women of that profession dirty. Take off your upper garment. Immediately, someone came forth with a rod made up of bamboo strips tied into a bundle. The eunuch stood behind Ruan Dian, waiting for Liao Jixiang's instruction. Probably out of pity and care for his men, Liao Jixiang asked one more time, can you correct yourself or not? Ruan Dian grinned playfully. Dugong, are you referring to my unreported checkpoints, or the incident of the dwarf pear trees, or my extortion of officials from the Yang Society? He rolled his eyes, trying to recall even more. Or do you wish me to correct my recent horse donation for fighting the Japanese pirates? Liao Jixiang stood up. Although his snow-white face appeared calm and composed, he was in fact simmering with anger. With a simple nod towards the eunuch holding the bamboo rod, the bamboo strips were quickly lashed out. Swish! It was the sound of bamboo strips tearing through the flesh. Ruan Dian didn't cry out. He extended his back and endured in silence. Liao Jixiang looked down from above, witnessing tiny beads of blood seeping from his dark flesh. This is for you to remember, to not develop filthy thoughts, and to not touch dirty women. Perhaps the word dirty had plucked a nerve in Ruan Dian. Unlike usual, he retorted softly, I find no shame when a man seeks a woman. While he didn't explicitly say anything, Liao Jixiang sensed a different interpretation in his words. Do you dare to repeat that? I said. Ruan Dian held his breath and lifted his head, his eyes glaring, filled with rebellion. I sleep with a woman in my arms at night, and I find no shame in that. Liao Jixiang's face was flushed red initially, then it turned pale, and finally it adapted a miserable shade of blue. Having apparently forgotten about his injured leg, he lifted his right foot and aimed at Ruan Dian's shoulder. Once the right leg kicked forward, his left leg couldn't bear the weight anymore, causing him to stumble and fall backward. Being shrewd and fast as Ruan Dian, he immediately jumped up and caught him in his arms, firmly helping him to steadily stand still. Liao Jixiang's glance towards him was tainted with humiliation and resentment. With a sudden push, he shoved Ruan Dian away, hid into the inner chamber, and gave one final command, 100 lashes. Don't hold your strength back. End chapter.